We all listen on a daily basis. However, do we listen intently to everyone? Research has shown that people spend between 70 to 80% of their day engaged in some form of communication. Are you listening?
Mm-hmm.
Even more surprisingly is that 55% of their time is actually spent to really listening. If you haven't guessed, today we're going to be talking about pseudo-listening, and that was an example of pseudo-listening. We all listen on a daily basis. However, do we listen intently to everyone? Research has shown that people spend between 70 to 80% of their day engaged in some form of communication. Are you listening?
Mm-hmm.
Even more surprisingly is that 55% of their time is actually spent to really listening. If you haven't guessed, today we're going to be talking about pseudo-listening, and that was an example of pseudo-listening. Our group has done a considerable amount of research. We've studied scholarly articles, studies, and we even did our own survey. Pseudo-listening has become all the more relevant in our lives today with technology and our increasingly busy lives. Pseudo-listening can be very harmful to our closest relationships. Today we're going to be talking about 3 main points. I will be talking about what exactly pseudo-listening is. Then Wesley will be talking about how gender affects pseudo-listening, and then Andrew will be talking about how pseudo-listening affects our relationships. So to begin, pseudo-listening can be defined as mindless listening. It is the type of non-listening that consists of appearing attentive in conversation, when you're only partially listening or your mind's just not there. In reality, our minds are not physically capable of listening 100% all day. At one time or another, we're all guilty of pseudo-listening. Imagine sitting in class, daydreaming about what you're going to eat or what you're going to do later that day, while the teacher is up front giving a lecture. To them, you appear to be listening, or you might even be looking straight at them, but you're not really listening, are you? This is an example of pseudo-listening and occurs all the time in our daily lives.
Now that we have an idea of what pseudo-listening is, we're going to talk about how gender affects pseudo-listening. In the article, Differences in Listening Between a Man and a Woman, it explains the different types of listening styles that each gender has. The first is men, who are action-oriented listeners, whereas women are people-oriented listeners. The difference between the two is that men focus on listening to information pertaining to the task at hand, and have little patience with people who ramble off topic or include unnecessary details. Women understand, connect, and feel more with the person talking to them. In our survey that we gave out, it didn't quite go the way we expected according to this article, but it did show us that gender-to-gender communication was more favored, meaning that males would rather talk with males and females would rather talk to other females. In the book, Looking Out, Looking In, it does mention that gender-to-gender communication is of more comfort for everyone because they can relate more, and the way that each gender communicates with the same sex is pretty much the same. It also says that it brings different reactions to each gender depending on what sex they are talking or listening to. During our survey, we had 6 more males over the females, which gave the males an advantage in the different points, like which gender ignored who more and which gender was easier to talk to. We also had parents and children respond to the survey to see which parent, mother, or father the children would confide in naturally. We guessed that the kids would most likely want to talk with the mother more than the dad, which came out to be true. But as we looked at the results for the normal part of the survey, we saw that there was no difference for either gender, on which they would rather talk to the opposite sex or of the same gender, male or female. Overall, based on our research, we found that it depended on the gender to see if the response was different, the conversation was ignored, or pleasant.
To conclude, we have looked more deeply into pseudo-listening, the impact of gender on pseudo-listening, and the effects it has on our closest relationships. Now ask yourself, do you really listen intently to those around you? Brian H. McGill once said, "The most sincere form of respect is actually listening to what another has to say."